everyone. My name is Makiva Jenkins, business strategist and business plan writer with the Prime Enterprise Group.
I held her in my arms. She was alive.
At 4, the jury in the trial of Yuri Jenkins has found him guilty of hiring a hitman to kill his pregnant wife, Makiva Jenkins. The judge sentenced him to life in prison.
That right there is the moment a Florida courtroom finally gave Makiva's family what they had been waiting 5 years to hear. On the night of June 29, 2017, pregnant 33-year-old Makiva was shot once in the head while she slept in her own bed. The man who got sentenced that day was her husband, Yuri Jenkins, the pastor's son who had been smiling in church photos with her just weeks before she died. But before we get to that courtroom, let me take you all the way back to where this story started, because there were red flags buried in this relationship from almost the very beginning. Makiva grew up in poverty, and she knew what it felt like to have absolutely nothing. That experience is what made her relentless. By 2014, she had started the Prime Enterprise Group, a business consulting company in West Palm Beach, Florida, that helped other entrepreneurs write business plans, build strategies, and get their ideas off the ground.
My name is Makiva Jenkins, business strategist and coach with the Prime Enterprise Group. I'm just here really quickly to talk about goal setting as it is Monday, the best time.
And this was not some small side thing she was doing on weekends, because by 2015, she had already crossed 6 figures in revenue, and by mid-2017, she was generating multi-6 figures while pregnant and raising 3 kids who were all under 10 years old. Now, Yuri Darrell Jenkins, the man she was married to, was a barber. He ran a makeshift barber shop out of the garage at their family home on Plumbago Place in Palm Beach County. And business records show he was listed as manager of 3333 Supreme Cuts LLC and 3333 Salon and Barbershop LLC. But by every account from everyone who knew the family, Makiva was the one keeping the household financially alive. She was the primary earner, and honestly, based on what came out later, she was also carrying the weight of Yuri's financial problems on top of her own responsibilities. So how did these two people even end up together? Yuri Darrell Jenkins grew up in the Palm Beach County area as the son of a local pastor. He met Makiva on New Year's Eve of 2009 at a church celebration when he was 23 and she was around 25. Makiva was already a single mother at that point, and Yuri came across as charming and church-raised and exactly the kind of man a woman who had been doing everything alone would want to give a chance to. They started dating in 2010. She got pregnant with their son not long after. The two of them got married in an intimate church ceremony where her brother Quay walked her down the aisle, and over the years they had 3 children together. On the surface, it looked like they were building a life. But what was quietly going on underneath that surface is the part of this story that is going to make you angry. A few years into the marriage, Makiva found out that Yuri had been having an affair with another woman and gotten her pregnant. Her brother Quay later described that moment by saying it just broke her heart completely. She kicked Yuri out of the house, which was the right move, but then she took him back because she still loved him. They had children together, and she was the kind of woman who believed in trying to hold things together. What she probably did not fully understand at the time was that this affair had also created a serious financial problem for her household. Yuri owed nearly $20,000 in unpaid child support to the other woman, and Makiva had been helping him pay that debt down. By May of 2017, Makiva had finally reached her limit. She filed for divorce, but then she discovered she was pregnant again, and she pulled the papers back. She did not want to be raising 4 children alone, and so she stayed in the marriage and kept trying to make it work. Just days before she was killed, on June 23, 2017, Makiva posted publicly about Yuri on social media, writing about how they had met at church on New Year's Eve and their 7 years of history together. And she genuinely believed there was still something worth holding on to. She had no idea that by the time she wrote that post, the man she was writing about had already started the process of having her killed. Yuri Jenkins had taken out a $500,000 life insurance policy on Makeva and believed that he was the beneficiary. On June 27, 2017, 2 days before the murder, Yuri Jenkins pulled his longtime friend Dmitry Dale to the side during a visit to the house on Plumbago Place and asked him, in what has to be one of the most reckless conversations a man has ever started, what would happen if someone wanted to have a person killed. Dale and Yuri had known each other for years through church, and their history ran deep. That's Dale himself in a police interrogation, describing just how long he had known Yuri Jenkins and his family. So when Yuri pulled him aside that day and asked what it would take to have someone killed, and when Dale pressed him on who he meant, and Yuri first said his father and then admitted it was actually his wife, Dale did not immediately walk away. He went and found a 19-year-old named Jovan Joseph, a mutual acquaintance, who agreed to carry out the killing. According to Dale's testimony at trial, Yuri described the whole arrangement as a money play connected to Makeva's life insurance policy, and made clear he wanted it immediately, telling Dale, "Man, listen, this has got to happen right now, today. This is the perfect opportunity for it to happen right now." The very next day, June 28, 2017, while Makeva was out of the house working with a client, the three men met at the Jenkins home, and Yuri walked Joseph through the house, showed him the layout, and pointed out the master bedroom upstairs where Makeva would be sleeping. The group sat there and talked through different options for how to do it, including killing her at her workplace, staging a car accident, or even making it look like both Yuri and Makeva had been attacked so that suspicion would fall elsewhere. They settled on the fake home invasion, and Yuri paid Joseph $10,000 in cash up front with a promise of another $10,000 once the job was done, while also handing over the gun that Joseph would use to carry out the shooting. Joseph had bought a revolver from a friend for about $60, and after that June 28th planning session, he sat down and wrote out a 3-page handwritten letter he titled Game Plan, where he documented the meeting with Yuri. He recorded receiving the money and gun and the full plan for the following night. Makeba, meanwhile, went to bed that night with zero idea of any of this. Shortly before 2 in the morning on June 29th, Makeba's brother, Quay Greer, stepped out briefly to run to a nearby convenience store, and while he was gone, Dale and Joseph pulled up to the house. When Quay came back, Yuri made a point of insisting on cutting his hair right then in the garage, in the middle of the night, with Dale also sitting there, which was the staging, the alibi setup that was supposed to make Yuri look like an innocent bystander when everything went wrong upstairs. A few minutes into the haircut, Joseph came through the garage entrance wearing all black clothing, with a t-shirt tied around his face as a mask. Once they were upstairs, where Makeba and the children were all asleep, Joseph did a few things that immediately stood out. He let Dale take the children downstairs to safety. He asked where Makeba's mother, Quest, was, which was a strange question because Quest had not been to that house in a very long time. And then he forced Yuri and Quay to lie flat on their faces on the floor before walking into the dark master bedroom where Makeba was asleep. The bullet entered near her right eye, and Makeba never woke up. Joseph walked out of the bedroom, left the house, and drove away in Dale's white Dodge Charger, which he abandoned about a mile away from the house. Yuri and Quay rushed into the bedroom right after the shot and found Makeba bleeding heavily from the head, with blood covering the bed, the floor, and the wall above the headboard. Yuri put on a performance right there on the spot, holding her head, applying pressure to the wound, crying and repeating, "I can't do this without you, don't leave me." Quay made the 911 call at 2:17 in the morning. Makeba was still alive when paramedics arrived, and they rushed her to Del Rey Medical Center, but she did not survive, and neither did her unborn child. And when investigators looked around that house, not a single thing had been taken. The gunman had come in screaming about money, taken everyone upstairs, and left without touching anything of value. He fired one shot at one sleeping woman in a dark bedroom, and then he walked out. Investigators noticed all of this within hours of arriving at the scene. Lead detective Sean Oliver of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office was the lead on the case, and he later testified that when he spoke with Yuri Jenkins that same morning, the man's behavior immediately struck him as strange, describing Yuri as joking way too much for someone whose wife was shot. And Quay had already noticed something suspicious too.
As a seasoned investigator at that time, I just thought his behavior was a little odd. Joking way too much for someone whose wife was shot.
That tip pointed investigators towards someone who had been at the house earlier in the day with Yuri and Dale. In the meantime, Detective Oliver also held a public press conference asking for help finding the getaway car.
This is a public plea for anyone out there who has information regarding the murder of Makiva. We do have something specific that we're asking the public if they saw something at a particular time, and that is because the suspect, after murdering Makiva, left the scene in a white Dodge Charger. He abandoned the Charger on Lawrence Road just south of Pensacola, which is about 0.9 miles from the scene.
As investigators worked through the physical evidence, the connections started forming very quickly. Surveillance footage showed a vehicle matching Joseph's following closely behind Dale's white Dodge Charger in the lead-up to the murder. And the abandoned Charger itself had a Miami Subs receipt inside from the previous evening, which surveillance cameras from that restaurant placed both Dale and Joseph at together that same night. Phone records also showed a clear and documented pattern where every time Yuri called or contacted Dale in the days leading up to the murder, Dale would immediately contact Joseph right after, creating a chain that investigators could trace step by step. Joseph had also gone to a hospital about 30 minutes away around 3 in the morning, apparently trying to build an alibi, but hospital surveillance footage and phone timelines contradicted his story completely and placed him there well over an hour later than he claimed. When detectives finally got Dale in the interrogation room, he eventually started talking. But Dale did not stop there. He went further and secretly recorded multiple phone calls with both Yuri and Joseph after the murder, and those recordings became some of the most incriminating evidence in the entire case. In one of those calls, Yuri told Dale not to say anything and insisted their secret was safe, not knowing Dale had already turned. And then, during his interrogation, when Detective Oliver finally confronted Yuri directly with what Dale and Joseph had told them, Yuri's response said everything. Meanwhile, Yuri was also giving television interviews, playing the role of a devastated husband.
Good wife. She was a good mom. She was an entrepreneur. She came from nothing to something. I held her in my arms. She was alive.
But the people who actually knew the family were not buying it. And while Yuri was giving those interviews, investigators had already learned that the day after the murder, he had contacted Tiffany, the woman from his affair, and propositioned her for sex. His wife had been dead less than 24 hours. He was also spotted visiting a strip club in the days following the murder, presenting himself publicly as a man in mourning. And then he made a phone call that handed investigators the clearest picture yet of exactly what had motivated all of this. About 6 days after the murder, around July 5th, Yuri called the life insurance company, expecting to be told a $500,000 check was on the way. He had arranged for someone to kill his pregnant wife for money that never was going to come to him. Joseph was arrested on September 2nd, 2017. Yuri Jenkins was arrested in December of 2017 and charged with first-degree murder. Dale had already started cooperating with investigators before that, identifying Joseph and recording conversations with both Joseph and Yuri that he later handed over to police. Yuri Jenkins's trial was supposed to start in January of 2020. Jury selection had already begun, they were 2 days in, and then the whole thing had to stop because several potential jurors reported overhearing a member of Makiva's family during a lunch break saying that the defendant was guilty. Defense attorney Greg Learman moved to throw out the entire jury panel. The The judge agreed, and the case had to start over from scratch. Then COVID-19 hit and caused further delays, pushing the actual trial back until the spring of 2022, nearly 5 years after Makeba's murder. When the trial finally happened, jury selection started in late April of 2022 in front of Circuit Judge Kirk Volker, with the prosecution led by Chief Assistant State Attorney Adrienne Ellis and her team. The prosecution's opening set the tone immediately.
He's calling to confirm that he is the beneficiary of that $500,000 policy.
The defense immediately pushed back, framing the entire case as being built on liars.
They have to testify in a way that convinces the prosecution that they're being truthful, despite the fact that they are both admitted liars, despite the fact that they have a history of not telling the truth despite swearing to tell the truth, despite the fact that neither of them can agree on what allegedly happened, or at least the story that they're supposed to be telling about what happened.
Dimitri Dale took the stand on April 29, 2022, and walked the jury through every conversation he had with Yuri in the days leading up to the murder. He admitted on the stand that he had lied to investigators repeatedly, but he told the jury that the only person responsible for what happened to Makeba was the man who started the whole thing.
Jovan Joseph took the stand starting April 30th and confirmed the $10,000 upfront payment, the planning meeting at the Jenkins home, the fact that Yuri personally showed him the bedroom, and that the arrangement was described from the start as a money play. When asked how he carried out the shooting, his words were direct. And then came the moment in the courtroom that nobody expected. When it was Quay's turn to testify, the pain he had been carrying since the night he held his sister in his arms finally broke through. Quay had lunged toward Yuri in the courtroom and had to be physically removed by deputies. The judge gave him a stern warning when he was brought back in, and Quay apologized and collected himself, because, as he put it, he had to be Makeba's voice up there on that stand. The defense declined to request a mistrial, and the trial continued. Beyond the testimony, the physical evidence reinforced everything. The fact that nothing was stolen from the house despite the robbery setup, the surveillance footage showing Joseph's car following Dale's Charger, the Miami subs receipt in the abandoned Charger tying the two men together, the phone records showing the clear communication chain from Yuri to Dale to Joseph, Joseph's failed alibi that surveillance footage directly contradicted, and the insurance call that Yuri himself made just 6 days after the murder, all of it came in front of that jury. The defense strategy run by Greg Learman was built almost entirely on attacking the credibility of Dale and Joseph. Learman told the jury the case came down to lies and liars, plain and simple, pointing to the inconsistencies in their early statements to investigators. He argued that both men had plea deals that gave them every reason to say whatever the prosecution needed them to say. Yuri Jenkins did not take the stand to tell his side of the story. The prosecution's closing hit different, though, with prosecutor Alexia Cox telling the jury directly that Yuri Jenkins is the reason Makeba Jenkins is dead, and that the gunman's only purpose in walking into that house was to finish the job Yuri hired him to do. The jury deliberated for about 3 hours total, and on May 6, 2022, they came back with a unanimous guilty verdict on first-degree murder.
We, the jury, find as follows. As to count 1, we find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment.
Judge Kirk Volker sentenced Yuri immediately, as required by Florida law for this charge: life in prison without any possibility of parole, plus $568 in court costs. The only victim impact statement came from Makeba's grandmother, Gloria Harold, who had helped raise her and who referred to her in court as "my daughter." She stood in a silent courtroom wearing a Justice for Makeba t-shirt and delivered about 2.5 minutes of words that were more generous and graceful than most people could manage after what she had been through.
The victim's family was visibly emotional as the jury read that verdict. Jurors deliberated for about an hour today before returning the verdict. Prosecutors say Jenkins hired a hitman to shoot and kill his wife while she was sleeping back in 2017. They argued that Jenkins was the mastermind behind the shooting and wanted to collect $500,000 of his wife's life insurance money. Prosecutors say Jenkins believed that he was the beneficiary. He later learned that Makiva had named one of her relatives as the beneficiary. The state's case focused on two men who say they conspired with Jenkins to kill Makiva. After the jury delivered its guilty verdict, Makiva's mother spoke in the courtroom.
They came to the verdict I wanted them to have, but on neither side was a winner. I know how he has made his family feel, because they had no idea he could do something like this.
And Harold continued to say that she had nothing bad to say about Jenkins, and all she wants now is for everyone to find peace. Following Harold's statement, the judge sentenced Jenkins to life in prison. The defense does plan to file a motion of acquittal, saying the state presented an improper case by putting witnesses on the stand who, quote, perjured themselves.
The two accomplices had already been dealt with separately. Joseph pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in July of 2019 and was sentenced to 15 years in prison in June of 2022 after completing his obligation to testify. Dale pleaded guilty to manslaughter with a weapon in December of 2021 and received 15 years of probation. In May of 2022, a judge added a 45-day jail sentence on top of that, of which Dale had already served about 30 days, meaning he walked out after serving roughly 15 additional days. The man who actually planned the murder and paid for it got the longest sentence by far, which is the correct outcome, even if those accomplice deals are always going to be difficult to sit with. Yuri appealed his conviction to the 4th District Court of Appeal on the same grounds his defense team had argued at trial, claiming there was not enough solid evidence and continuing to attack the credibility of Dale and Joseph. On December 20, 2023, a unanimous 3-judge panel issued a 5-page opinion upholding the conviction and found that the trial testimony from both Dale and Joseph provided competent, substantial evidence of Yuri's guilt, specifically that he had arranged the killing and promised to pay for it. The court also made clear that even though both witnesses had lied early in the investigation, their actual trial testimony was consistent on every fact that mattered, and questions about whether witnesses are telling the truth are for the jury to decide, not an appeals court. Yuri Jenkins is currently incarcerated as inmate I-315466 at Century Correctional Institution in Escambia County, Florida, serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole. He still claims he is innocent. Makiva Jenkins had a 5-day business plan seminar booked for mid-July of 2017 with a room full of clients registered and ready to attend. That seminar never happened. The business she had built from nothing, the one that she had scaled to multi-6 figures while surviving homelessness and a broken marriage and raising 3 children, went inactive after her death with no transfer, sale, or continuation. The Florida Division of Corporations eventually marked the Prime Enterprise Group as inactive, the way companies get marked when there is nobody left to show up and keep them running. She had fought hard enough to know that things could always get better. She just never got the chance to see how much better they were going to get. What do you think about this murder case? Do you think Makiva would be alive today if she pushed for the divorce completely? Let me know in the comments section. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this. See you in the next one.